The Millfield Public Library closed at 6 p.m. sharp, the heavy doors swinging shut with a muffled thud. Sarah tucked the folders of copied articles under her arm and headed out into the rapidly fading light. The temperature had dropped noticeably, the air taking on a crisp bite that promised an early winter. She made her way down the library steps, lost in thought. The missing persons cases from the 60s tugged at her mind, loose threads begging to be pulled. 6 people vanished without a trace over a single summer. No evidence, no closure for the families left behind, and no indication of why the cases had interested Daniel Cobb so deeply half a century later. As Sarah crossed the street to the small parking lot where she'd left her car, the back of her neck prickled. She paused, hand halfway to the driver's side door. The lot was empty, leaves swirling across the cracked asphalt, but the feeling of being watched was unmistakable. She turned slowly, scanning the deepening shadows. The sun had nearly set, bleeding orange and red across the horizon. Streetlights flickered on with a buzzing hum. But there at the mouth of the alley between the library and the neighboring antique store, was that a figure, half hidden in the gloom? Heart suddenly pounding, Sarah squinted into the darkness. Hello? Someone there? No response. The figure, if it had ever been there at all, was gone. Sarah waited a long moment, hand resting on the butt of her service weapon, but the alley remained empty and still. Unnerved, she climbed quickly into her car and locked the doors. She let out a slow breath, chiding herself for jumping at shadows. The atmosphere of the strange little town was getting to her, the weight of Daniel Cobb's murder and these cold cases from the past. Still, as she pulled out onto the lamp-lit street, she couldn't quite shake the feeling of eyes on her back. A presence in that alley, cloaked in shadow and malice. Sarah drove aimlessly for a while, trying to clear her head. She needed food and a good night's sleep. The mental gears wouldn't stop turning otherwise, endlessly chewing over scant details and dead-end clues. She pulled into the gravel lot of a small diner on the outskirts of town, lured by the warm yellow glow spilling from the windows. A bell chimed above the door as she stepped inside, enveloped instantly by the smell of coffee and frying bacon. The diner was nearly empty at this hour, just a few scattered patrons hunched over steaming mugs at the Formica counter. Sarah slid into a corner booth, red vinyl creaking under her weight. A bored-looking waitress ambled over, pulling a pencil from behind her ear. "What can I get you, hun?" "Just coffee, please, and a bowl of the chili if you've got it." The waitress jotted it down and walked off without a word. Sarah pulled out the folders and fanned them across the table, hoping that food in her stomach would jog some new insight. But the words swam before her tired eyes, the faces in the faded black and white photos blurring together. Missing. Vanished. Gone without a trace. Just like Daniel Cobb, a shy grocery clerk who had no business being ritualistically murdered in the woods. What connected them? What had Daniel seen in their cases that had cost him his life years later? Or was it all just some terrible coincidence? A young man in the wrong place at the wrong time? The waitress returned, plunking down a mug of coffee and a bowl of steaming chili. "Holler if you need anything else," she said, already turning away. Sarah sipped the coffee, wincing at the bitter bite of it. Her gaze fell on one of the photos, a pretty young woman with dark hair and a shy smile. Maureen O'Connell, 24. Vanished on her way home from her job at the local dance hall. Maureen's photo stirred something in Sarah's memory. She'd seen that face recently, not in any of the case files. No, it had been... Her eyes widened. In the library. There had been a photo of Maureen on the wall near the local history section, part of a display on Millfield's bygone days. But Maureen hadn't been the only familiar face in that display, because right next to her photo, smiling out from a black and white snapshot, had been Bill Thompson, the owner of the Millfield grocery, looking barely a day over 20. Sarah's heart began to race, the chili turning to lead in her stomach. Bill had to be in his 60s now. But that display, those photos, they had clearly been from the early 60s. At the same time, the missing persons cases had happened. Had Bill known Maureen? Had he known the other victims too? And if so, why had he never come forward? What was he hiding? Sarah's hand shook as she pulled out her cell phone, scrolling frantically through her contacts. She needed to talk to Sheriff Briggs, to tell him about this connection. Perhaps Bill wasn't the harmless small-town grocer he appeared to be. The line rang once, twice. "Come on," Sarah muttered. "Pick up." But after the fourth ring, it went to voicemail. Sarah cursed and ended the call without leaving a message. Fine. She'd go to the sheriff's department in person then. She couldn't sit on this, couldn't risk Bill getting wind that she'd uncovered his secret. She threw a crumpled 20 on the table and gathered her files, the bell chiming discordantly as she rushed out the door and ran smack into a tall figure blocking her path. "Going somewhere?" Sarah staggered back, hand instinctively flying to her gun. That voice. She looked up slowly into the stern, weathered face of Bill Thompson. He stood unnaturally still, his expression inscrutable. "Bill," Sarah said carefully, "you scared the shit out of me. I was just headed to see Sheriff Briggs. I know what you were doing." Bill's voice was cold, flat, empty of inflection. "I know what you found." Sarah's stomach turned to ice. Her hand tightened on the grip of her weapon. "What are you talking about?" Bill smiled thinly. "Let's not play games, Detective. We both know you're too smart for that." He took a step closer. "Now, we can do this the easy way, or..." He let the unspoken threat hang in the air between them. Sarah's mind raced, darting frantically between fight and flight. She never had time to decide. A heavy weight crashed down on the back of her skull, an explosion of pain. And then there was only darkness. Sarah's last thought before she lost consciousness was that Bill Thompson's eyes weren't human at all. They were black as a moonless night and filled with the cold void of space.